Welcome to Microsoft Research Conversations in STEM. I'm Stefany Cruz, a 2021 Microsoft Research Ada Lovelace Fellow, a PhD student in the Kamoa Lab at Northwestern University, and your host for today's panel on discussion on research in STEM as a career. We have a lot to talk about, but before we get started, I want to remind you that we're planning to leave time for some of your questions at the end, and you can submit them via the Ask a Question button on the lower right corner of your Teams Live interface. So let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right into our conversation. First, meet Jaime Teevan. She's a chief scientist for Microsoft Experiences and Devices Division, where she's helping the company create the future of productivity. Previously, Jaime was a technical advisor to Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and was a principal researcher at Microsoft, where she led the productivity team. Jaime has published hundreds of technical articles and is a renowned author, patent holder, and speaker, as well as an award-winning innovator. She holds a PhD from MIT, and in addition to her work at Microsoft, is an affiliate professor at the University of Washington. Next, we have Mar Gonzalez Franco. Mar is a senior researcher in the Extended Perceptions, Interaction, Cognition, or EPIC group at Microsoft Research, where she explores human behavior and perceptions to build better technologies in the wild. In addition to her prolific scientific output, her work has also transferred to projects used daily around the world, like Microsoft Soundscape and Together Mode in Microsoft Teams. Mar holds a PhD from the University of Barcelona and MIT in immersive virtual reality and clinical psychology, and completed her postdoc studies at the University of College in London. Finally, meet Haiyan Zhang, currently the Chief of Staff for Xbox, Microsoft's Gaming Division. Haiyan was formerly the Senior Director of Innovation at Microsoft Research Cambridge and Technical Advisor to Lab Director Chris Bishop. She has hosted a BBC television series called Big Life Fix, where she invented technologies for people and communities in need, and has a rich history of design, innovation, and technology leadership. She spent the last 20 years doing everything from hands-on work in software engineering to blue sky envisioning. Haiyan holds a bachelor's degree in computer science. She spent the last 20 years doing everything from hands-on working in software engineering to blue sky envisioning. Haiyan holds a bachelor's degree in computer science, a master's in distinction from the Interaction Design Institute in Nigeria, and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and the British Academy of Film and Television. Welcome to all of you, and let's get to the questions. Well, you're all veteran scientists, but you didn't start out that way. So let's begin with some stories. What inspired each of you to go into STEM and then decide to pursue research as a career? Did you always know you wanted to be a scientist, or was it less of a grand plan and more of a series of serendipitous events? Jaime, would you like to start?
Thanks, Stefany. It's a good question. I doubt anybody ever really has a grand plan for anything. I didn't enter computer science or really become a STEM person until pretty late in my education. So although I'm a computer scientist, I didn't take a CS course until my sophomore year of college. I probably still wouldn't say that it was a surprise that I ended up as a scientist, though. And I don't say that so much because I like logic problems or structured ways of thinking. In fact, as a kid, I remember people would always try to give me puzzle books, and I thought they were really boring. I would say that my being a scientist probably more stems from my love of thinking creatively. So as a kid, I spent a lot of time writing poetry or making up elaborate plays with fancy special effects with my siblings. And people tend to think of science as highly analytic, but scientific research is also really deeply creative. And, it takes a lot of creativity to dig through existing theories and to think about what we already know and to discover the underlying truth. So the first CS course that I took, for example, that was at a liberal arts college. And I think that was really nice for me because it allowed me to think about how I approached computing creatively. And I got to do a lot of research as an undergraduate. While I was there, it was sort of in the late 90s and the early days of the web, and web search was a new thing. And so I developed this new approach to understanding how web content could be found using link analysis and sold that to an emerging search engine. So I guess I would say, like, it was obvious from the beginning that I was a scientist and a researcher, but I was probably also nothing like what we think of as an obvious scientist or a researcher.
Great, thanks for sharing, Jamie. Mara, how about you?
So I agree with Jamie, right? Like, there are many paths that can lead you here. And I would say it's very much about having opportunities and not being afraid of taking them. You know, sometimes you're like, you don't really know what you want, and you enter university and you start looking around, and it's more about not being afraid, the fact that no one else has done it before, or, well, now we have people who have done it before. But not for everything. I hope the next generation reaches further than what we are reaching, right? And so there is this part of, you know, not being afraid of trying things. And then as a researcher in the junior years, for example, when I started my postdoc, which is something that typically a lot of people who finish PhDs do, is that moment where you don't know you want to be an academic or maybe move to industry, especially in computer science where you have both options. And you can start having these very long postdoc positions that last for 2 years, and then you start a new one, and it's very much like you're moving around the place all the time, and you don't have a settled base anywhere, right? Like, so you're meeting new people. It has many more things than just the research aspect of it, of your actual work. It means a way of living. And you end up in very unexpected places, and oftentimes you like it. And if that is something that you like, you can continue going there. And eventually you will find out, and that's something that was my calling partially, to move to industry, because you have this broader impact. So your chances of actually making impact on a product are relatively small, right? Like, products have many people involved in them, but the reality is that this exists more in industry than you will have in academia. And I think that's something that also attracts many people from research to industry, and attracted me there.
Thanks for sharing, Mara. Haiyan, would you like to add?
Hi, thanks, Stefany. It's great to be on this panel. I'm going to go way back and say that I guess back in the early 90s, I discovered something called the internet, and this started my fascination and obsession with technology, and particularly sort of connective technologies. And I have to say that growing up, I was a bit of a nerd. You know, my parents had moved from China to Australia when I was 8 years old, and I was just really, like, I'd learned English for the first time. I was very disconnected from other kids, and I just found that it's through this medium of the internet, which at the time was kind of Usenet, so news groups and IRC chat and Moos and Muds, I was able to kind of connect with other nerds, with other people. So for me, technology was really actually a rich social experience, first and foremost. And so, you know, as part of that, I sort of started logging on to this Moo called Lambda Moo and programming a text-based world. And it was just a way that I could see, well, this is a great way that I can create an experience for other people and be able to connect with other people in a kind of what I thought to be a safe way, which we, you know, continue to work on as well. And so fast forwarding, going from that to kind of dabbling in programming, and then taking computer science. And then at Microsoft Research, which I had just incredible privilege to work at over the past few years, working with researchers to bridge that gap between deep technical research and application and product, and in business. And I would say I think there are many kinds of scientists. I would call myself a maker and a technologist, which is some of the work I do is about understanding, meeting people, understanding people, trying to gain insight into human behavior and thinking about how we can configure and create new technologies that can help them in their specific circumstances. I think another thing that kind of inspired me, kind of going back to my nerd roots, is just science fiction. And as a young girl growing up, being inspired by visions of science fiction in the future and wanting to spend my career bringing those visions to life.
Thanks so much for sharing, Haiyan. That's very awesome. So the next question is, now let's move on to the next question. So you're all doing each diverse work within the broader scope of technology and STEM research. And I think an overview of your lives and work would be really interesting to our audience. So Jaime, let's start with you. You began in productivity research and then moved to being a technical advisor to Microsoft CEO. Now you're the chief scientist for a whole division, but you still have a soft spot for productivity. How are you taking your research team to the company and the world at large?
Yeah, I have a soft spot for productivity at the world's largest productivity company, so I'm very fortunate there. My job is actually actively about shaping the future of productivity. I get to work with Office and Windows and Teams and Surface and Bing and Cortana, and draw on the state of the art of what's available in the academic literature and in the world to help people get the things that they care about done. So that's pretty cool. When I first moved out of Microsoft Research to work in Satya's office, my job was to help him understand the impact of a broad range of technology on the company so that he could understand sort of the depth of what was happening and be able to make good decisions for the company and moving forward. And it was sort of interesting when I was first working with Satya, I tried not to talk about my research at all, even though I was super excited about it. So this sort of gets to your question, Stefany. I was excited about it, but I felt like I needed to make sure I was representing everything else. And then I figured out that I was passionate about it for a reason, and that I actually could provide value, bringing that to the table in addition to all of the other stuff. And that was pretty cool. I'm probably not unrelated to then Satya and Rajesh, who is my current manager, asked me to move into my current role. And, they didn't really have a clear picture of what it should be. It was, it was obvious that our move to the cloud and changes in AI were going to cause a significant disruption into how people get things done. But it wasn't obvious about how that was going to show up in our products. And one of the things that I think was really impressive about Satya and Rajesh is that they knew that research and that sort of the growth mindset that we as researchers bring to problems, to think about how do we figure out things and make them better. They saw how that was going to be important. And so I got to make up this role that was all about putting research and product at the center of what we do as a company. So I think about what my team and I currently do using an ABC mnemonic. I'll just go through it because it provides a little bit of useful context. A, we're looking to advance the future. So this involves figuring out how emerging technology shows up in our products and people's experiences. B is about building a culture of research within our product groups so that we can iterate faster and explore more and really push the boundaries of what's technologically possible. And then C is about connecting our products with the research that's happening in other organizations like Microsoft Research, so that's internal, and then also externally with the academic community. And I think the work that we're doing has been particularly interesting this past year because it's just seen such significant changes to work practices. Just about a year ago, we probably all remember just starting to hear about the emergence of a virus that now is part of our daily lives, and the rapid shift to remote work that brought on has just dramatically changed the way people get things done and really made our ability to do research and to respond quickly to things that are unknown fundamental You know, it's actually, ironically, it made my job easier. So I moved over trying to think about like, how do we integrate research into our products? And then all of a sudden, I'm not pushing against norms. All of the norms are broken, and we need to figure out how to move forward. And as the world's productivity company, like Microsoft leaned into that, into understanding and responding to changing work practices. We have all sorts of places and different ways that research shows up at the company. There's the research that happens in Microsoft Research, which is like a think tank and very academic research. We've got research happening with user researchers in our product groups. It's about understanding and seeing how people respond to products. We've got research happening in marketing that's understanding what are people's needs and how do we build the products that they need. We have research happening in HR and facilities to understand like how do we support this company with hundreds of thousands of people. And so like all of these different organizations started doing research about how work practices were changing. And it's been fascinating to watch all of that come together and really expand our understanding of how technology can make work better. And I guess on it, like we just a couple of weeks ago, a big push for my team is we released what we believe is the world's largest compendium of research on how people's work practices are changing. I'll maybe tweet out the link to that or something if you're interested in checking that out.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie. That's awesome. So my next question is for Haiyan. Haiyan, you may have the most unconventional career path among the group here, having done everything from software engineering, hardware R&D, UI UX design, cloud platforms, television hosting and inventing. Now you're working in gaming as Xbox Chief of Staff. Like, tell us more about the work you do for a living and what advice you'd give to emerging researchers who may want to do it all like you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Stefany. Thank you. Well, I've got to say, I'm really I'm proud to be on this panel with Mara and Jamie, who are also just extraordinary researchers and women who've done so much in their careers as well. Stefany, as you said, some of the work that I've done in my career, it can be a bit of a problem talking about what I do for a living. Or what my specialism is. I would say that first and foremost, as I said earlier, I'm a technology optimist, and I guess I have this fundamental belief that if we're to move kind of technology forward and people's experiences forward as they interact with the world, then sort of these great innovations should sit at the intersection of great technology, great business thinking, great user experience, and user research. And so I guess part of what I've tried to do is become a generalist across all three of these, some with greater success than others. But it's just, I guess, me on this personal journey to kind of learn more about the world and how things work and how Microsoft works, but also how other businesses work and how technology works and how people work. And I think so that's sort of my personal motivation. And I find myself having joined Xbox and gaming at a really exciting time. And what I sort of really love about the way that we're working is that every business decision we're making centers around empowering players and empowering our partner creators, game creators, to realize their vision. Because I think if you have purpose, if your business is centered around purpose, it really comes across in the products that you deliver, in the quality of those products and how people receive those products. So we're just in this great era of exploring new technologies, thinking about new ways that people can play. And I'm especially interested in kind of the intersection of gaming and AI. So previously in Microsoft Research, I worked with many researchers who were looking at AI agents and different ways that machine learning can accelerate your gaming experience. And within gaming, we are trying to incubate some of those into our roadmap, actually a little bit following in Jamie's footsteps in terms of creating programs to integrate research thinking into gaming, and also in a way trying to influence back in that between our organization and Microsoft Research, thinking about, well, how can we talk about our grand challenges within gaming, within the industry, in order to influence the research agenda for the next 10, 15 years.
Thanks for sharing, Haiyan. It's very inspirational. Your work is so cool. Now, your work in realities, particularly augmented reality and virtual reality, combines human psychology with computer science. Tell us more about your work and talk in more depth about how social scientists are playing an increasingly important role in computer science. How might someone with interest in multiple domains find a place in cutting-edge technology research?
Yeah, I think this is something very interesting that I actually see across all of us is this multidisciplinary aspect, right? You need to have an outlook of what else is there, and I'm using augmented reality and virtual reality as a test bed because it really interfaces between the user and the reality, right? So you can you want to have an immense desktop with many displays, you can simulate that inside virtual reality. You want everything you want to do, you can sort of simulate it. And one of the aspects that I'm seeing there is that we need more people in the community to start playing with these topics. And I've been working a lot with open source and libraries and creating libraries. So also it's funny because sometimes it seems like it's totally unrelated what I do from Haiyan or Jaime, but we intersect sometimes. Like I released this library, it's super niche, it's for avatars. And all of a sudden Haiyan is this radar, right? Like she's aware of everything that's happening. And not only at Microsoft, because this is something that I released for external. And she's like, hey, who is releasing this at Microsoft? And then she comes back to me, right? And I feel like this is also partially how we interconnect in a company that is so large. Sometimes there are certain things that pop up, the interest of other people inside the company, and then triggers even more of this multidisciplinary work. Particularly for your question about social sciences and psychology, I think there are many ways to come into working in the area that I'm working, and many people can start with psychology and social science, and then start using computer science and avatars to explore things. One example, you cannot go into a bar and start a bar fight to see how people behave, but you can simulate something like that in virtual reality, right? So social psychology is great for them because you don't need to do questionnaires anymore, like, hey, would you do this or that? You can actually see it, and that's very interesting for them because they can basically test their experiments. And we did an experiment on the Milgram obedience to authority experiment, which is one of these master experiments on social psychology, and we reproduced it in virtual reality. It's an experiment in which there is deception, there is punishment, there are all these things that currently ethical committees would never allow to happen in a real setup. But in virtual reality, everybody knows this is a virtual reality. Despite all of that, people respond very realistically. So one of the interesting things in my path is that I was a deep core computer scientist working on real-time systems, and the best real-time system, and I always love that part, right, is that you can see it. That's the part I like from graphics. So we were building computer graphics in real time, okay, with motion tracking, all of these things before. Now you can buy even consumer electronics that have that. The RTK tool for hand tracking on Oculus, I mean on all of our mixed reality, and also now Oculus, you know, competitors, everyone is working on these things, and you can buy it off the shelf. So the interesting thing is that I came from that world of real-time systems, and I was more and more interested on the loop, right? There is a human in the loop, and let's see how they behave, the psychology, the sociology of it. And now I'm moving back into, I want more people working on this, and I'm only one person. So I'm releasing tools and libraries for the other people to work on this, and it's becoming amazing, the adoption that we're seeing.
Great, thanks for sharing more. Anyone interested in AR or VR, just go to more. All right, the next question is for all of you. So once someone decides research is what they want to do, they have to decide whether they want to do it, and there are basically four options: academia, peer research institutions, applied research labs, or corporate research divisions. What are the advantages and disadvantages of working in each of these settings, and what might tip the scale in favor of one or the other? Mar, would you like to start?
Sure. I think this is, first of all, it's more plastic than people think. You can move from one to other. We also have amazing visiting researcher programs, and we bring a lot of academics here, not only at Microsoft Research, I think all across the industry. Many of our distinguished engineers were also before somewhere else on the academic track. I feel, especially for the computer science world, this is very, flexible. So it's not like you need to make a decision and you're gonna stick with that for the rest of your life. But I also think that there are particular differences, right? I often say that in the research that we do here is very much you and yourself, right? And that's the team, to build things, and then you start convincing other people to work with you, right? And you get an intern, but it's limited. Basically, it's not even the resource of people, it's time at the end of the day. So you have to be very picky on how you expand your research. While maybe in academia, you will get less professional, collaborators, because they are going to be students who are learning and might make more mistakes, but maybe you have 20 of them. So you have sort of an army to push your agenda. In that regard, it's a very different strategy, the one you need to take for, exploring your line of research in one area or another. But at most, for me, the difference is the possibility that you might bring things into a product that changes the lives of millions. And I think some of my colleagues here can talk better about that area for sure than me here.
I guess I'll jump in then, because I can speak from sort of the product side and the value of doing research that gets in people's hands directly. Just like Mara was saying, like, I don't know that the boundaries are super distinct between that. And it's actually kind of interesting. I don't think we necessarily choose that we want to do research first and then we figure out what career we want. You actually see a lot of how a product is built now is increasingly looking like research. We run pretty much all computing services are online services that get data, and we can run experiments and learn from. So that sort of research mindset is increasingly useful in all aspects of technology. And you actually see this blurring then happening between like academic and industry roles as well, where a lot of faculty at universities have affiliations with companies. A lot of companies support and engage with academic research, attend conferences, read papers, publish. A good example of this is Brent Hecht, who's a valuable member of my team. He's been visiting Microsoft for the past year and a half from Northwestern, where he's a tenured faculty there. And there's a real, I think, obvious reason for this blurring. There companies engage with academic research because they get a lot of value from it. There are long, hard questions that aren't sort of on our shorter term product cycle that we think about that are important to explore and answer. And we're also seeing that computing technology, pretty much like any. Oops, did I lose you all? Nope, okay, I just got a notification. But anyway, we're seeing that computing technology has externalities, right? There's unexpected consequences to the technology that we build. And I think that the academic setting is really good for pushing on that and exploring that. And you see a lot of interesting research around fairness and ethics in AI, for example, coming out of the academic community. And universities engage with industry because it's a really interesting place to be doing research right now. Like a lot of the best computing research right now is happening in companies because that kind of research requires scale, a scale that only comes with being associated with a successful product, like a scale of compute and a scale of data and a scale of collaboration. So I think there's like these synergies, at the boundaries,
Thanks for sharing, Jamie. Haiyan, how about you? Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I would say that I think there are classes of research. So, for example, machine learning, where I think you can be engaged in deep algorithmic exploration, but when you are publishing a paper, or when you are trying to engage and demonstrate the tangible impact of a new algorithm, usually that's through a known and shared experience, like a video game. So, for example, we've seen this explosion of leveraging old 80s, 90s video games to showcase the performance of your AI agents, of your machine learning algorithms. And it's great to see research tapping into popular culture and tapping into product in order to demonstrate the tangible value, the impact. I think, and in some cases, that sort of bridge between, at least in video games and AI, is that some folks are using video games as a vehicle to push forward on the research, because games provide these virtual worlds that, in their research they can simulate and explore. But at the same time, researchers also see the value of actually using their work to push forward on this medium that they love, which is video games. So I love the synergy, the sort of back and forth. And so that's one thing that we are, I think, trying to push on. And I think one of the values of that industry can provide, whether that's to an industrial research lab or academia, as Ma said, I think it's very fluid. You could do great work at any one of these places, but one of the great things that industry can provide is the questions. What are we researching on? What are the best research questions? Now, obviously, there's an academic side where there's kind of more fundamental academic questions we're trying to answer, but I think industry can really help shape. If you are a researcher thinking about generating villages in Minecraft, generating stories in Minecraft, how great is it that this can be fed with real world sort of industry research in how people are actually playing Minecraft and experimenting on the product side, and actually putting some of your work into the Minecraft game, so that comes back and influences the research. So I love to see the back and forth. And also, to Ma's point about this kind of fluidity of different institutions, is that in 2 weeks' time, we are within Microsoft Research, we're running a gaming and AI research summit. Sorry, I'm putting in a plug here, which is open to everybody. But that is where we're bringing Microsoft Research talks and academic talks and industry gaming from Xbox, but also the rest of the industry talks, to come together and do that sharing and think about, what are these big meaty research questions that we can really influence the research community with.
Thanks, Haiyan. Thank you all for sharing. It's very insightful. So before we let our audience ask you guys some questions, I'd like each of you to give us your take on some of the most promising and important new ideas being explored in STEM research. What's exciting right now? How might emerging researchers, like the members of our audience, get in on the action? Haiyan, let's start with you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Typical conference call issue. Well, as I said, we've got this conference coming up. I think that's a great way to engage. I love how some of the democratization of machine learning research tools. Just a few days ago, I saw on Twitter, simple tools being made available that anybody can start experimenting, developing AI within kind of a gym environment, a virtual game environment. It kind of speaks to, my own teenage years of just playing around and experimenting with technology. So I do highly encourage, going to talks, and especially now with everything being virtual, it's just much easier to tap into sort of the best academics in the world giving talks and not having to queue up for conference tickets.
Very true. going sometimes. Mar, how about you?
Yeah, I would like to add to Haiyan, and that's a perfect example. I think that we're reaching this point in which we have super technologies reaching production level, crowd level, mass scale, as Jaime was saying. And I think for me, the most promising thing is that they work together, which for Haiyan means gaming and AI. But I think this, and I'm paraphrasing here one of my colleagues, Bill Baxton, right? Like the next big thing is not that thing, is that things work together. And I think that is particularly interesting for us at Microsoft, right? Because we have almost a bit of everything. So I think we have this opportunity to merge things in a very new way that I'm already seeing some amazing projects around here, right? From Surface Fleet, which we presented some examples already in our conferences. And I think for us in Microsoft Research, conferences are a very good place to test temperatures of things. We like to prepare a lot of demos also, and that's a good way to test temperatures. And one thing that I love about Microsoft Research is that nobody confuses that with an actual product, which means we have far more freedom, right? Like we can do prototypes and people will understand that, oh, they are seeing whether this works or not. And I think all of these TED-based is a fantastic place to test things on the wild and then maybe move them into product. But this idea that things work together, I think that's the most promising thing for me.
Thanks for sharing, Lawrence. Jaime, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, you know, I think both Haiyan and Mar had great, interesting challenges and opportunities for engaging. You know, STEM research and computing research in particular, like it's such a fundamental part of everything we do, and is such a way to address sort of the big crises that we encounter as well. Like we're so lucky to be able to help the world through big challenges in, you know, and I think this year has really highlighted that. So I really think there's an interesting opportunity to think about how computing, you know, Satya, who's our CEO, he says this, he says every company is a technology company. Like every company is using technology to get their core work done. And like, you can just see that now that everything is digital, and actually jobs that we didn't, you know, at Microsoft, we often think that we support a class of workers called information workers. And these are people who, you know, work on a computer and get work done that way. And this past year, we've seen jobs that you could never imagine are information work become information work. You know, you meet with your doctor and that's mediated by a computer. You know, you're a person who works in food services and like you get orders and respond to them mediated by technology. And so there's this real opportunity. You know, I think that's the big thing is like what we're doing is supporting all of the different ways that people get things done. And I actually think we're increasingly too recognizing like there's the way we open up and enable people. And then there's also the influence that we have on people in that way. And I think being intentional about both of those halves, how do we use this digital transformation that we're in the middle of to like open up new opportunities for people, and how do we make sure that we do so in a way that is that helps people make the right decisions and pursue their goals you know, at the same time.
Thank you all for sharing. This was very insightful. As a PhD student, I learned a lot. So I want to go ahead and start taking questions from the audience. Let's see. So one of the questions we had from the audience is, as a PhD student, how can I be part of the research team? Do you have collaboration with universities? If so, what is the procedure?
Maybe.
Jaime? Oh, Mark, sure.
Yeah, I can take this one as a starting level, and maybe Haiyan and Jaime can continue. But Microsoft Research is super engaged at all levels. I mean, you, Stefany, you're one of our fellows. We support the students at very different levels. We have undergrad programs. We have programs for diversity and inclusion. So just don't be afraid, as I say, just go get it. And we have programs also for junior faculty, for Latin America, for Asia, and apart from that, I mean, my profile is open, right? And I received emails from people that they want to learn more, or what to do next. Should I do a master? And they are just gathering information from people. And I feel like oftentimes we're just one spot in which people reach individually, but we also have institutional effort to make this happen. Our biggest program is for sure the PhD program, where we have almost 1,000 students every year from all around the world. This year is not possible physically, right? It's still virtual internships, but I think that's our start program. And I was an intern here also during my PhD, and I loved it so much that then I came back, right?
And I'll make a plug for the MSR website as a great source for resources. So if you type in Microsoft Research into your favorite search engine, you should find a lot of good opportunities there.
Hi, would you like to chime in?
No, I think now in my role within gaming, I'm just trying to be more supportive of our outreach to students through Microsoft Research. So we're thinking about, well, how can we issue more gaming related challenges that PhD students can then take on through internships with MSR. So yeah, just excited to see how MSR over the years has created these different ways to, it's like there's a spectrum of different kinds of engagement from, in the past PhD summer school to fellowships to internships. I think there's just a variety of ways and that's great.
Awesome. So another question is, it's kind of like this. What are your thoughts around research questions exploring explanation interfaces for explaining decisions of solely automated decisions made for end users? I guess this is more for Mar in this situation. Mar, would you like to answer?
Well, I think Jaime would be great for this one because of the, being already on the product and what this is, should I get this email or should this email come to me later on Monday, right?
It's such a good research question. It's such a good user experience question. It's such a fundamental question. So it's really part of a broader scope of questions, which is what does it mean to work with AI, right? AI, the sort of initial ways that technology impacted the work that we do was by turning the stuff we do on paper into something that we can do in a digitally mediated way. I can write a paper, in my notebook, or now I can do it on Word, and that's sort of not very creative or imaginative in terms of how we get things done. Increasingly, however, we're able to learn from example and have people interact, see people's interactions and replicate them and do more. And it changes what we're doing, and it changes the relationship that people have with the system, because there's no longer a predictable expected outcome from what you do. If I do something, it's going to depend on the context and how it and what's going on and all of that to figure out what's going to happen. And so it becomes really important to understand when is a mistake made? How do I correct mistakes? How do I understand what's happening? How do I understand the biases that are built into an AI system? An AI system is essentially just learning biases. It's learning patterns, and some of those are good and useful ones that help us get stuff done, and some of those are ones that we don't intend. And how do we do that? And it's such an interesting question. It's exactly the example of where we need that intersection of working with people and building and engaging products and deep research to understand it. So it's an important question. There's ways that we can play with it. I think my big thing that I'm super excited about right now is right now AI is treated a little like a black box that gets brought in to help us out. And as AI is what drives work, it's going to become something that we need to interact with, we need to understand, we need to teach, we need to, all of those things. And so I'm super excited for what that future brings. And I think it's a great question.
You're muted.
Haiyan, would you like to chime in on that?
No, I think Jaime really covered it. I think we cannot stress enough, and I think this is the point where industry and research really need to work together, because we are bringing in new systems and on the cusp of inaugurating new systems that are completely driven by AI, and in many cases, AI that is a black box, and if we're not careful, those systems can end up making decisions for our lives that we are not aware of, and introducing biases. And I think when we bring AI systems from research into deployment, implementation in the world as industry, we need to really, it is that intersection point that's going to be really important for us to think about how these systems are being used and what parts of our lives these systems are touching.
More.
Yeah, I think something very interesting here, and it links a bit with one of the projects I've been working out a bit, is called Project Soundscape. And the whole idea there is that we're guided through perception around the space, right? Like I want to go to the pharmacy, so I'm going to hear a sound like, you know, ancient humans would hear a waterfall and use that as a guidance to go there. And then using the spatial audio, figure out the way to get there, create a mental map to go back to your village. And currently we have outsourced of all of that decision making to turn right, turn left, and then you just don't remember how you got there. Okay, so I feel like we have to bridge that gap. We need to reduce cognitive load of users, but not cognitive use, right? And I feel like there is a book called The Glass Cage, which is very nice around this dichotomy of which decisions should be made, which not. And I think it's partially this idea that we should be supporting the human with AI and not replacing the human.
Thanks for that, Mar. So we have another question. What are your favorite and least favorite aspects about day-to-day life as people working in industry research and research management positions? So, Haiyan, would you like to go first?
Why do I get the? I think I get the
Mar. Let's go with Mar then.
Oh, okay. I'll take this one. So, one thing that I love about not being in academia is not having to write the grant proposals that are super long, and you know, you have to describe 4 years ahead with 100 pages. It's like a book. I have to say, however, that I do volunteer for NSF reviews of grants, so I do read those. But I am grateful that most of our research is probably so fast because we write 1-2 pages. Like, hey, there is a possibility to have some interns with the team in Jaime's org. And we write a 1-pager. It's about a topic that we're already interested. So it's not like, and then it gets it or not, because, you know, there are reasons why, you know, something is maybe not ready yet for product or so, but you move, you know, that took you an afternoon. So I think we move very fast in that regard. And that's partially something that I really like about being in research in industry, that allows you to move very fast because of things like this, right? Like even just small bureaucracies.
I'll give you some more time too, Haiyan, if you want. But for me, probably the thing that I find both the hardest and frustrating, but also the most interesting and like core to my job is prioritization. Like my job is to learn about stuff and then make decisions about how to accelerate it or make it go forward. Like, and that's learning about the research that's happening in the world. That's thinking about the stuff that different groups here are doing. This is about my own research and my own things. Like, there's so much happening, and there's such an opportunity. It's like a giant candy box, and it just doesn't work to be like it's all amazing, and you have to have focus. And actually, I would say that's what getting a PhD is all about, is like learning. I started out my PhD and I was like, how am I going to come up with good questions? And when I would walk into the room and people were like, ooh, what's your thesis topic? I felt like I was taking a test. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. And it was terrifying. And then somewhere along the line, it changes from that to actually seeing the many things that are there and figuring out that you have to be able to understand all of the context and all of the potential impact, and then say no to awesome things in order to push forward on anything.
All right. Okay. Thanks. I think previously in Microsoft Research, I mean, I love in research the time, I think the luxury of being able to focus on a topic or a theme and doing kind of deep exploration and thinking into that theme. And I think moving into a product group and thinking and sort of into this chief of staff position, which is really encompasses sort of our business strategy and the running of the business and our culture, our teamwork and culture as well. I would say I think the biggest challenge is just sort of the context switching, thinking through people, culture, thinking through business decisions, long range planning, and then really finding the time to think about how do we then make those connections to research? How do we integrate more research? And I think for me, that's been, I think, a big challenge, is being context switching and then finding enough time to do each thing well. I missed research terribly, but anytime I find opportunities to connect with researchers and to talk more deeply about the work they're doing, I really treasure that time. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. So I guess we have time for one last question. How can somebody with sound knowledge about computing, especially AI, but without formal education in computer science, explore and find suitable opportunities for research in Microsoft or other organizations? Jamie, would you like to start on this one?
Yeah, no, it's a good start. Like, Microsoft's a broad company and we hire from many backgrounds and many disciplines. You know, we have people who, you know, have backgrounds as economists or backgrounds in, you know, in art, and these are all things that contribute, and these different perspectives are super valuable. So there's many roles at Microsoft. I mean, half of the company is in the field and sales and marketing, like in many, you know, the folks that are sort of what you think of as traditional technology. I actually get very frustrated too. I hear a lot of people, you know, talk down on their own expertise, and there's some sort of fetishization that we have of like technology expertise is like, that's the really smart stuff. And I certainly want to, you know, encourage everybody to embrace their ability to understand things. And like, I can be a world expert in information retrieval, and I still sit in lectures around information retrieval algorithms and don't understand everything that's said. Like, that's just the way that it goes. So there's many ways. There's Microsoft has a ton of different programs for people at different stages in their career and different stages in their life. You know, there's the Made App program, for example, which brings people in specifically to think about AI. It brings in, you know, a really interesting, diverse teams together with folks, you know, that are going to do product management, folks who are going to do development, folks who are going to do research to push in interesting areas. So there's a number of interesting programs. I don't know if Mar or Haiyan might know some others that are worth highlighting.
Yeah, I was actually helping one of our folks here figuring out different tools for a local public radio, but I think it's most of the tools right now to bridge the gap. I think having a bit of literacy on computer science will for sure help you moving around a tech company and around the world, you know. So there are programs like, depending on ages, right? The Girls Who Code have their own programs. Grace Hopper, which is one of the largest conferences for women on computer science, has programs too. And recently they had an agreement with Full Stack. This is still ongoing. They cover full tuition for the Coding Bootcamp. And there, you know, things like computingforall.org. You know, like if you look around, you're going to find a lot of programs. And then there is, as Jamie, I think she was mentioning, this woman at Microsoft Scholarship that you can find it also under the Microsoft website. So I think there is plenty of opportunities, and we're here to support you. And there are many organizations focused on this, right? It's not just for women, but today is the Women for in Science, and I hope that there are many more joining and trying to learn these basics, and maybe learning and building a whole career in research in this area.
Haiyan, would you like to add to that, or?
I think Jamie and Ma covered it really well. I would say that I think fundamentally I think it's important for anybody who wants to get into research and may specifically want to target Microsoft Research or other institutions, is to really kind of understand what they're passionate about and what they want to gain expertise in, and whatever that expertise area is, I think they can always find connections to, it may be what, the work that Microsoft and Microsoft Research does, or maybe another company. But I think what's great about Microsoft Research is whatever expertise area you're in, as Jamie said, economists or artists, there is just a wide variety of ways you can make those connections into kind of the core of what Microsoft is doing or what Microsoft Research is focused on. But I think figuring out what you're passionate about and your expertise area is super important. Knowing yourself, I think, is very important as you head into this commitment to do research.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Well, we reached the end of our time. This has been great, and I hope you all enjoyed this session. I want to leave you with a quick reminder that you can access a recorded version of this panel discussion on the Microsoft Research YouTube channel in the coming days. And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, also we posted resources that we talk about. They are on Twitter. Good.
Take advantage.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.